Hello everyone, and welcome to a new lecture of research methods, which will be focusing on research methodology. So by the end of this lecture, you will be able to explore different research methodologies and how they work. And also we will discuss how you can choose the right methodology for your final research project. So research methodology refers to the process and procedure of the research, and it prescribes the appropriate types of research methods. So research methodology, or you can call it research strategy, they try to address certain points. So it try to give like rationale for the data collection methods that you will choose. For example, if you decide to go for a questionnaire to collect the data, you need to justify why do you think that questionnaire is the most appropriate data collection method for your research. If you decide to go for interview, you need also to give reasons behind choosing interviews as the most appropriate research or data collection method for you. So research methodology will enable you to decide what data to collect and from where you need to collect those data and when you need to collect those data and what are the types or what are the data collection methods and the data analysis as well. So your research methodology refers to how you propose to answer your research question. And there are different research methodologies, and this include experiment, survey, case studies, ethnography, action research, and grounded theory. And in this lecture, we will try to focus on every one of those research methodologies, how they work, and what are the limitations for everyone. So the first research methodology is experiment, and experiment method is particularly associated with physical sciences and also laboratory experiments. However, they are also common in social science disciplines, for example, psychology, marketing, economics, and education. And when you use experiment, usually the researchers they are interested to test the reaction of the people or the behavior of the people in certain situations. So for example, if we will take this experiment example, so there were researchers in Australia who were interested to study the disciplinary practices used by mother to control their children, and they compare it from developmental perspective. So from they choose like 20 mothers and they ask them how they can react or behave in 12 situations with their children. So they with their eldest children who is like 8 years old and with youngest child who is 4 years old. So they choose those mothers from 4 ethnic different groups: Greek, Lebanese, Vietnamese, and Anglo. And they randomly choose them from a list of families. However, those families, they have certain criteria. So they should have like a similar socioeconomic level. They are coming from similar geographical areas. So then they compare those like 4 ethnic groups and try to see what are the differences between those mothers and related to their disciplinary practices. So usually in experiments, you have 2 groups: the experimental group, which is usually exposed to the experiment, and also the control group, which is not exposed to the experiment. And the most important factor here is that like both the groups, the experimental and the control group, they should be equivalent. So they have similar characteristics, and the experiment should be investigated systematically under identical or also similar conditions, of course, apart from being exposed to the experiment of the experimental group. So you can minimize the variation between the 2 groups and also validate your findings. And also, when you use experiment, we usually are interested to test causality and effect. So we try to develop hypotheses and try to test those hypotheses. So if we have this example here, IKEA effect. So there was a team of researchers from Harvard University and other universities. They were interested to research the cognitive bias, which they called IKEA effects. And this cognitive bias means that people usually, they tend to overvalue items that they have collected or assembled themselves. So they called it IKEA effect because it refers to the Swedish manufacturer and furniture retailer IKEA, which usually sells like items which you can use for like assembly or like creating things from those items. So for those researchers, in order to empirically confirm this hypothesis, which is the cognitive bias, so they conducted an experiment. And this experiment involved building an origami frog using instructions, and they asked the participant after they built the origami frog to give prices to their products and other participant products. And also the bidding phase also included origami made by other experts, expert folders. So as you can see here from this graph, the result actually showed the participant, they valued items that they created or assembled themselves much more than the items that were created by other participants. And not only that, they almost like valued their items like almost equal value as the expert origami. So this experiment actually proved their hypothesis or the cognitive bias that people tend usually to over value things and to be biased when they have to value something that they created or assembled. So experiment can yield like causal relationship. However, the limitation of experiment that they couldn't capture in depth some of the reasons or factors for this causal relationship. So for example, in IKEA effect experiment, researchers were able to prove their hypothesis and to prove the cognitive bias. However, the experiment couldn't tell us what are the reasons for people for such bias. Another factor or limitation that experiment can be time consuming, particularly if the researcher is interested in measuring the long-term effect. And sometimes it's also difficult to design experiments, especially that you need to find the appropriate experiment group and also the appropriate control group. And you need to choose also the right measure and conduct the experiment under similar condition. And this is sometimes can be out of your control and also significantly add to the cost of your research. So this might be expensive for the researcher and also sometimes can be difficult to administer. However, with careful design, experiments can provide valuable and also interesting results, as we see with the results of the IKEA effect experiment. The other research methodology is survey, and this is widely used method in business and management research. And when you use survey, you aim to obtain information from a representative selection of population, and you present your findings as being representative of the whole population. And when you use survey, we usually use data collection methods such as structured questionnaire or interviews to collect information from respondents. And when you use survey, we are usually interested to investigate patterns and also the association between variables. So if we look at this example or at this study, so this study aims to investigate the relationship, the direct relationship between human resources management practices and SMEs performance in the UK. So as we can see that when you use survey, so you present your findings as tables or as a chart. So here we can see that the researchers or the authors, they presented their findings, which related to if the SMEs, they are using low or high formalized human resource practices, and how this are related to the SME's performance in term of financial performance or labor productivity. There are many types of surveys. So you can use like personal surveys. So for example, you just like go to the homes of the people and ask them to fill the questionnaire. You can go to the shop or a mall and just stand in the street and stop people to fill the questionnaire. Also, you can use personal telephone, or you can use computer-aided telephone interviews where the interviewer like follows a certain script on the screen. which is provided by a software application. And both of them you need, the researcher need to fill the questionnaire. You can also send mails and ask people to fill the questionnaire and send it back by post as well. Or you can use like email or electronic email, or you can send emails, or you can send, or you can use a website. It's also, for example, there are online platforms such as SurveyMonkey, where you can ask people also to fill the questionnaire for you online. And usually in the mail and electronic survey, usually the survey is filled by the respondent themselves. So one of the main advantages of the surveys that they can be relatively easy to administer, and they don't need usually any field work, and you can access significantly high numbers of participants and get large amount of data in short time, so it's cost effective. And also the availability of online sites enables the wide and cheap distribution of surveys, such as I mentioned before, SurveyMonkey. Also, surveys, they can be like more objective because they are standardized. So you ask the same question to the same, you ask the same questions to all of the participants. And also when you use the appropriate sample, which is the representative sample, survey can enable you to generalize your results to the whole population. However, you need to ensure that your sample population is truly representative and consider what are the characteristics of the total population that need to be represented. So maybe you need to focus on characteristics that include age, or maybe education, or post-goal, or ethnic group, or maybe income, and so on. And this depends on the purpose of your research. Also, you might think that you can easily develop a questionnaire or a survey. However, it's difficult to develop a meaningful survey. So surveys need to appeal to respondents, so they couldn't be too long, they couldn't be too difficult to understand. And also important factor that you need to ensure that when you design the questionnaire or the survey, that you are really measuring the issue, that your question will measure accurately the issue under investigation. So usually for these reasons, you need to conduct a pilot survey to ensure all questions means the same to all respondents. Another limitation of surveys is that they, and also for experiment, not only for survey, they provide answers to questions such as what, where, when, and how, but it's not easy to find out why. So we might still actually lack understanding of certain issues, so there is no account for human thoughts or human feelings or human opinions, and this should be investigated using qualitative research. That's why this leads us to the case study methodology. So case study is a detailed study and in-depth investigation of a specific case. So it might be a person such as Steve Jobs, it might be a group such as people with special dietary needs, it might be a place such as Oxford, it might be like certain development program like by Oxfam, for example, or maybe a certain organization like Amazon, Airbnb, and so on. Or maybe you can focus on multiple cases, not only a single case study. So despite the fact that case studies have often taken into consideration as qualitative research and methodology, they might also be quantitative, or they include a combination of a qualitative and the quantitative approaches. So data that you collect, you can collect it from different methods, for example, through observations, through surveys, through interviews, and analysis of documents, secondary data. So your data can be qualitative or quantitative, or a mix of both, quantitative and qualitative. When you use case studies, they are good for describing, comparing, evaluating, and understanding different aspects of a research problem. So when you use case study, you aim to gain contextual and in-depth knowledge about a specific subject. So it's unlike experiments and surveys, where you can choose the factors or variables to be studied. So case studies usually research a topic with more depth, and they discover new variables which might not be covered in the existing literature. Also, sometimes the problem or the issue needs to be tackled or like addressed from multiple perspectives. So for example, if we talk about like the impact of social media on SMEs performance, so you need to explore it in depth from different perspectives, from the consumer perspective or perception, from suppliers perspective, from employees perspective. So from different aspects, which make case study more appropriate research methodology. So case study is a popular also approach in education. So for example, if you want to study how teachers can implement active learning strategies with a focus on a case study of a local school, which promotes active learning. So if I give example of one of my friends who she was doing her internship in Istanbul in Turkey. So when she noticed that new teachers, they had problem in terms of their confidence perception and mental well-being regarding inclusive practices for several reasons. And also she reflected on her experience that she lacked the self-confidence at the time when she was doing her undergrad education at the university, since she didn't have any professional experience. So this observation and this reflection on her personal experience led her to research in her PhD, to start her research, which aims to explore the student teachers' self-confidence and mental well-being regarding inclusive practices, focusing on the case study of the 3 principal projects. So she observed those teachers in class before and after taking part of this project. Also, she did a questionnaire with 100 teachers, and she interviewed 6 teachers. So this case study research will enable her, because she's still in the analysis stage, it will enable her to explore if this program, the case study in this case, made any contribution on improving the self-confidence and the mental well-being of the teachers regarding inclusive practices, and also in what ways the program contributed to that or did that. If I give another example actually of case study of my master dissertation. So I did my master like a few years ago, and I tried to explore the experiences of women entrepreneurs in the conflict zone of Gaza Strip. So in my research, I focused on the case study of a place. So I focus on Gaza Strip and try to understand, my research question was, what is the influence of institutional factors on women entrepreneurship promotion in the conflict zone on Gaza Strip. So in my thesis, in my master dissertation, I applied the institutional theory. So I tried to understand how the formal institutions in terms of laws, finance, and public sectors, and also the informal institution in terms of perceptions and attitudes of the women, social networks, and social norms and family context, how those institutional, formal and informal institutional factors influence the woman entrepreneur promotion in the case of Gaza Strip. So I tried to explore the topic from different perspectives or aspects, and I conducted semi-structured online semi-structured interviews with 16 women entrepreneurs. I relied on secondary data, for example, the Palestinian statistics. And recently I published my master dissertation, and I published it in the International Journal of Gender and Entrepreneurship, which is a 2-star journal. And I advise you actually, if you are planning to continue with academia or with research after your master's degree, if you want to do a PhD, I advise you to focus on publishing your master dissertation. I published my master dissertation in a 2-star journal, which is really a good journal. So I advise you, if you want to continue with research, to publish your master dissertation. So case studies, they focus on people's experiences and practices. So researchers can work on a small geographic area or with a limited number of people. So case studies contribute to better clarification and understanding of complex issues. And their recommendation also can contribute to change the lives of the participants, or maybe like the performance of the companies. For example, if you are doing a synoptic research, so this is a case study research. So from this perspective, case studies are a strong research methodology, as they require an in-depth research and a holistic perspective, and they can provide even a data source from which like further analysis can be made. So maybe you can start with a qualitative, like with case study, and then you take those findings or the variables that emerged during the data analysis and take it and do questionnaire or do survey. And also, like with regarding to generalization, actually, it might be possible to generalize it from case study. However, you might to handle this with care. And also it depends on how far the case study example is similar to other cases. But one can claim actually that when you do a case study example, it's not your aim is not to actually to generalize, but to provide contextualized and comprehensive understanding for possible transferability and generalization. So you try to develop theory rather than just to provide like a statistical generalization. However, when you provide in your research like sufficient contextual information, you provide like detailed description of the context, of the characteristics of the participant, of the conditions of the environment that you are studying, this can enable the reader or other researchers to make the decision to generalize, or they might just like take your findings and try to apply them in a similar context and compare the results. The other research methodology is ethnography, which is a methodological approach which was initially related to anthropology and then emerged by the interest to understand the origins of culture and civilization of other group of people. Ethnography is very field-oriented and naturalistic. So researchers usually they use some existing theories to direct their research, and they go to the field and stay for a considerable amount of time. They observe people, they interview them, they participate even with the community in order to understand and interpret the social life of the people in that community. So for example, my colleague, they conducted an ethnographic study in Jerusalem. So they tried to understand or to explore the lived experiences of Palestinian women street vendors to resist economic adversity, social marginalization, and political conflict. So those researchers, they use the concept of everyday resistance from Michael D. Sirto work, which means the colorful everyday practices performed by ordinary men and women in order for them to survive. So they took this concept, everyday resistance, and they went to the field and they conducted their field work in an open air marketplace in Jerusalem, where they observed 15 women, Palestinian women, street vendors who come from neighboring villages, and they were present almost every day. So they they went to the field almost they spent 4 to 6 hours daily, and their field work lasted for 2 weeks. So this ethnography actually can be like a short ethnographical study for 2 weeks, and it might be long for 2 years. It depends on the nature of the research and also on the budget available to it and the time as well. So they were observing those women. So through observing the participant, the researchers were able to better understand the day-to-day activities and practices of those women street vendors in the marketplace, and how they operate and how they interact with their natural settings. So in order to do ethnographic research like this, there are certain steps. So first of all, you need to have a general research question, and then you need to select the relevant location. You may choose more than one location if the research question or problem needs that. So you need to select a location that will provide you with the best opportunity to observe participants and to take field notes and to understand how the people in that environment, they act, how they communicate, how they think. After you select the location, you need to decide or to choose if you want to be overt or covered. So do you want to be known by the people that you are a researcher and you are conducting a research in this area? But you need to be careful that, because when people recognize that there are other people or researchers, they are observing them and they are trying to to know what they are doing, they might actually act and respond differently. And on the other hand, if you decide that you don't want the people to know you, and you need actually to consider like the most ethical way to observe and collect data. After you choose, you will go for overt or covert, you need to gain access, because you will be in the field or in the community where those people live or work. So it's necessary for you to obtain permission for access to those locations that you are planning to research. And it's recommended actually to obtain this permission in writing. So you need to tell the people, or like the decision maker people, to let them know what is your observational method, what are you planning to do, what is your research about, how you are trying to participate, and what information or data you will be collecting, and so forth. So you need to be very ethical and considerate before you go to the field. After that, you need to collect data. So you can collect data either by observation, so you can like observe people and take field notes. However, you need to think about like what type or what data that you need to observe and collect and write about or reflect about it. So you need to be very like selective with the data. You couldn't just observe anything. You need to be guided by your research question all the time. And also you need to write or to take field notes. So you write descriptions, you write your impressions, you write your feelings. Maybe you can write also your initial interpretation and analysis. And then after that, another like method that you can use is interview. So you can also interview a participant, and you need to decide when you can do the interview. So maybe you observe like something interesting, so you can go immediately and just like interview the person or the participant. You can do the interviews at the end of the day, or maybe at the end of the entire project. So you just need to decide when you want to do the interview, and you need to determine who is the best to interview and what questions are critical in order to help you to understand your research question. Also, you can collect archival data, so such as reports from the organization or from the community that can help you to understand and give you like explanation to the topic or the thing that you are observing. So you can review things like papers, maybe you can review emails, phone conversation, you can review the website of a company, or maybe you can review other like information sources. So this will enhance your understanding of the environment. So after you collect data, you try to interpret those data, and then you, depending on your research question, and if your research question was answered using those data, you might decide you either like you want to collect more data, to go to the field and collect more data, or maybe it's sufficient, the data that you have, it's already sufficient and you are happy with the like the analysis that you have, and then you start the writing up and the findings. So let's look at this study, which tried to explore why the people face parking issues. This is an ethnographic study, and you can access the full YouTube video via the link already in this presentation. So this is an example of an ethnographic study. So ethnography allows you to get an insider view of reality and to study people in their own settings and environments. And so you can collect the data in realistic or naturalistic settings in which people act naturally, like for example, when they observed in the previous example, when they observed people when they were trying like to park their cars. So ethnography can be used to study also marginalized group of people and provide you with a detailed and rich database for further investigation. However, like one of the limitations of ethnography, that most ethnographic research requires fieldwork, so it's very time consuming as researchers need to spend sometimes like years in the field. Also, like fieldwork lacks the level of structure and control which you can find in surveys and in other quantitative like approaches, and this like ensure like the objectivity, help to ensure the objectivity as the case in surveys. Also, you need to be accepted by the group or by the people or by the company you are studying. And this means that you need to do the same job as they do, or maybe live in the same environment and circumstances as them for a long time. Maybe. So for example, a friend of mine, she did her ethnographic study in Egypt in slums. So she had to spend like long time in slums where she studied experiences of marginalized women, and she participated with them in their daily activities. However, when the researcher shares like similar culture and understanding of the context with the group that they are studying, i.e. like when you are like insider researcher, for example, you are working in the same company, for example, or you are studying like the same like context. For example, when I did my master dissertation in the case of Gaza Strip, I'm from a Gaza Strip, so this helped me like to gain the trust easier, and to better understand and interpret the experiences of your participants, which enhance the validity of your findings. But also you need to be careful because your personal values and attitudes as insider researcher may lead you to bias, which while you are like interpreting the findings and writing the final report or dissertation. Also in ethnography, there is the issue of generalization. If the researcher, for example, is studying one group in depth over a long period of time, they couldn't claim that this group is typically to other groups that may have the same like characteristics or purposes. So for example, we couldn't say like the employees in one company that they are necessarily like representative of the employees of a similar company in another part of the country or even in the same city. However, similar with case study strategy, the aim here mainly is to have in-depth understanding and contextualized understanding of a certain group or a certain context, but with detailed description of the context and the participants and the community. Other researchers can decide if this can be generalized and transferable to other contexts or to other groups. So other research strategy is action research. So here research is conducted with people rather than on or about them. So the participants here, they are part of the research team in order to solve a practical problem. So it's more of a collaborative research where the researcher is not a detached observer who just like observe or like analyze or criticize as the ethnographic case study. Instead, the researcher actively participate in both the research and also in solving a practical problem. So action research requires the researcher to use the result of the research and to act upon and change the situation that they are studying. So they use your findings in order to make an immediate change or immediate step. And as we can see that action research relies on the plan, reflect, observe, act, recycle cycle. So in action research, the process, when the people or the employees who are the subject of the study, they take part with the researcher in the research process, we call it participatory action research. So people or employees, they have their own thoughts and they decide what is the problem. They decide how to collect the data. They decide what kind of data that they need to collect. And they also participate in the data analysis and how can they use the findings to solve this problem, which affect them directly. So the researcher and participant or employees, they work together in order to lead to the change and even to emancipation. That's why action research can empower participants to change their reality. Therefore, action research can overcome power balance and can create democratic research as the people decide what is important for them and what need to be done with the data afterwards and what's also that what they want to change. So usually, like the researcher and the participant, they use their findings, the findings of the research or the results of the research, which lead to action. That's why it's called action research, which lead to action, which designed by the people in order to benefit them. So action research is most appropriate when there is a need for a change or improvement or solving a problem. So for example, if you are doing a client project, this might be considered as action research methodology because you are focusing on a certain company and you are trying to solve a practical problem, which can be also like negotiated and like arranged and planned with the employees in this company. So action research, it's context-oriented, it's problem-oriented, it's future-oriented, and it produces particular solutions and the new knowledge, and also it produces insights both to the researcher and also to the participant. And this kind of research is widely used in educational and organizational research. And also it's well suited to the needs of people who are conducting research in their workplace. So for example, if you are working in a company and there is a problem that need to be solved, maybe if you have a business, for example, and you are struggling with marketing, so you are trying to do a research in order like to enhance your marketing strategy so you can increase your revenue. So it's good for people who are trying to focus on improving certain aspects of their work and of their colleagues' practices. So in teaching, in education, for example, maybe there is a teacher who is concerned like to improve the performance in the classroom. So they might find action research useful because it can offer systematic approach to the definition and solution as well. So this is an example of participatory action research where there was a study which aims to investigate the role of youth and other members of community as agents of change to build peace in marginalized conflict community in Kenya. Let's watch. Same as in case study, action research is focusing or focuses on a particular context. However, in action research, participants, they play a greater role in defining the problem, as we saw in this example. So those youth in Kenya, they define the problem to be addressed, and they the research focus more on answering the research question, but at the same time, fulfilling a practical need. So when you have the findings, you can make immediate change and action. While in the case study, you provide your solutions, you provide your recommendation, but this might take more time to be implemented. So it might have a long-term effect. In the case study research, so you talk to the participant to investigate the issue that you as a researcher identified prior to the research. However, the findings in action research, they aim at feeding back to the community or to the participant, while in case study, it's more target the academic community. That's why action research enables to provide solution and change based on the perception of the beneficiaries themselves, rather than imposing solutions which might not work for those people. So as we can see now that action research involves an extensive component of fieldwork and also interpretation and analysis. So it's a very applied research and it's a very demanding approach. However, it's also very rewarding research strategy and can lead to provide change and better solutions for the people or the community under investigation. So action researchers usually they use prior conceptions and existing theoretical framework. However, our last methodology that we will be discussing, grounded theory, usually it's a research strategy when we don't wish to be informed or guided by any prior conceptions about the topic that we want to investigate. So grounded theory, it's used to build theory from data collection and analysis. So if we look at that's the grounded theory process. In the normal or traditional research, you usually have your research problem, your research question, you read the literature review, and then you have you go to the field, you collect your data using any method, data collection method, and you do your analysis, and then you write the discussion and conclusion. However, in the grounded theory, the researcher can start off with a light literature review, sometimes without even any literature review, and they go to the field and they start collecting and analyzing data, and then decide what data to collect next. So they usually use interviews and observations in order to collect data. And they keep the constant comparative, where the data that they collect, they are constantly being compared with each other and also with existing categories or with new categories. So each additional data, it's usually compared to others which already collected and coded. So here researchers, they are trying to develop a theory, which we called it in the first lecture, the inductive approach, rather than testing a theory, which we called the deductive approach. So when the researcher, they reach the theoretical saturation, when there are no new insights or the findings that they are just repeating themselves, then the researcher can stop collecting the data and coding. So as this theory starts to emerge, the researcher then can conduct extensive literature review to see how the literature in the field relates to their emerging theory. And then after that, they can start the writing up of their theory and the conclusion. So here the theory emerges from the data through the process of coding and constant comparison. Grounded theory is very important because it can provide or offer rigorous approach to research. You can understand the action from the point of view of the human agent. And as I said, it's tend to generate theory about a certain social phenomena rather than like testing a theory. And it's more appropriate also when there is like very limited research or very limited theories which can like explain the topic or guide the topic. It's a very time consuming, and it also grounded theory needs more experienced researchers who can adopt like some theoretical perspective before they go to the field. So after we discuss all of those research methodologies, the question here, like which methodology that you need to use, this depends on certain factors. First of all, you research a question. Before I mentioned that your research question should be the first thing to think about when you do your research process. So your research question should determine your strategy, data collection methods. So you need to ask yourself, what data are you looking for to answer your research question? Do you want to generalize your results? Then use surveys. Or do you want to study the topic in more details and explore a specific context in depth? In that case, you can use case studies. So you need to ask yourself which approach will produce more useful knowledge. Do you want to use the findings that can lead you to act immediately and lead to change? Then you can use action research. So you need to think carefully about your research question and what are you exactly trying to find out. Another factor is the available literature. So what other researchers already did. So how they dealt with this topic, what methodologies they use. Is there any calls for specific research methodology? For example, some researchers might ask for future research which uses case study. Also, knowledge pay off. So will you learn more about this topic using a quantitative or a qualitative forms of research? Which approach will produce more useful knowledge to you? Which one will do better? Also, philosophical issues. Some researchers prefer like one strategy to another. This may also involve like paradigm and philosophical issues, or what a good piece of research looks like. So for example, positivism researchers, they will do surveys or experiments. Like interpretivism researchers, they will go for case study or grounded theory. Another factor is the practical consideration. It's also very important, the issues of time, money, samples, access to data or access to organization or communities, your familiarity with subject and your research skills. So as a master level, you might not have enough time to do, for example, grounded theory, or you might have not even the research skills to do grounded theory. This might be like more appropriate for a PhD research. So you need to think more about which strategies are practicable, given the time, the limited time and other resources that you have available to you. And the most important thing that as long as you are able to justify your chosen methodology and method, this can be like sufficient for you, the justification. So this is the end of our lecture today. What I want you to do now is to think like which, depending on your topic and your research question, which like research methodology you think like be most appropriate for you to use for your research proposal. In our next lecture, we will try to explore secondary data. We will try to discuss also their strengths and weaknesses. Thank you so much.